Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back for another interview with a hopeful for Maryland governor. I'm here with David Lasher, who is the candidate from the Libertarian Party.
That's right.
And first of all, I just want to let you know that we're here on behalf of the Maryland State Bar Association in coordination with Stevenson University. You're on the beautiful Stevenson University Green Spring Valley campus.
It is beautiful, yes.
And I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for being here and being a part of these proceedings here today. So welcome, David Lasher.
Thank you, and I think that I really appreciate being here as a third-party candidate. I think that there's a lot of talk in politics at all levels of government about democracy and inclusion. I think that there's a lot of need to hear from more than just the two established parties. And I would salute the Bar Association for giving me access to this forum. So thank you.
Well, it's our pleasure, and looking forward to having a good hour-long debate and discussion with you about all the issues you'd like to bring as a third-party independent candidate here. So let's get started. First of all, I'm just going to start with this. Just for the members of the bar who may not know who you are, who is David Lasher? How is it that you came, what is your background, and how is it that you came to be sitting here today running for governor of the great state of Maryland?
Okay, who and why, right? So, yes, indeed, David Lasher. I live in Annapolis with my wife, Margaret, who works for the state of Maryland, and our young teenage daughter. And we've been here 15 or 16 years now in Maryland. What do I do? I'm an IT executive. But what does that mean? What I do is I help organizations, commercial organizations, public agencies. I help them figure out how IT can help them do whatever they do better, then choose that technology, put it in, and make use of it. So I work at a high level with organizations to become better by using IT globally. And then my political journey. How did I end up sitting here, right? So I was raised in suburbia, USA, moved around a bit, and by the time I became voting age, I was a Reagan Republican. And of the Reagan Republicans, you could fit me into the Jack Kemp compassionate conservative realm. And I was content there, but I began to question that affiliation with the invasion of Iraq under Bush. Right? Started to feel uncomfortable in the Republican Party. And then I decided to divorce myself from the Republican Party with the rise of Trump. I was working, as you know, for Governor Hogan at the time, but I decided that at that time that I gave up hope on the Republican Party representing who we are and taking us where we want to go. And I chose the Libertarian Party because it is the one party truly dedicated to a principle. It is famously in some circles known as the non-aggression principle. And basically what it says is, I will not use force to get my way. Right? So no bullying, no bossing, no riots, no insurrections. We respect each other. And in that spirit, we can debate it out, but we will also hug it out too, and that's the way we in the Libertarian Party try to be. So I feel it's a good fit, and the principle is a guideline. It keeps us true. It makes us predictable, which I don't think you get from the two established parties, as we can explore further.
So let me ask you a question. Before we get to it, I'm interested to talk about the Libertarian Party nationally, but more, obviously you're running for governor of the state of Maryland. What does that mean at a state level? So why did you choose, just from a personal standpoint, why did you choose the third party standpoint when somebody like Larry Hogan, for example, I think he probably would consider himself the anti-Trump wing of the Republican Party, and his, and I'm not going to speak for him, but he is staying within the party to try to fight for, quote, the soul of the Republican Party from within. Why did you make the decision to go outside of that and go third party?
Well, you just expressed the narrative given by Hoganite types of candidates. That's the narrative. I'm the anti-Trump candidate. But we really didn't see Larry Hogan stepping out and saying anything against Trump until Trump had irreparably damaged himself, right? So part of the reason I left the Republican Party is because it was not forceful enough or quick enough to denounce that in Trumpism, which I personally can't abide. The demagoguery, the divisiveness. Is there some good things? Yes, there's some good things that all of our presidents have done, right? But
to be fair to the governor, though,
yeah.
he did in the actual election didn't vote for him. He voted for
himself. No, was that?
I think he voted for his father.
In the first, yes, he voted for his father.
So he did come out pretty quickly denouncing.
But wasn't that an evasion?
Trumpism.
Okay, but wasn't that really an evasion? Isn't that what our so one of the reasons that I'm running is that I've also if you look at my degrees, I've been amongst elites for a long time, right? But I've lost faith in elites, and one of the reasons is they don't hold themselves to the same rules or laws that they hold others, right? What I would have respected from Governor Hogan more at that moment when he said, I'm not going to vote for my own party's candidate, the two candidates that everybody else is voting for, it was an evasion of the responsibility that the rest of us were taking on, right? I felt it was theatrics, and it was disappointing to me. I felt it was, he famously, when he got reelected, talked about riding the purple surfboard to reelection. You remember that? And I think that is good in the sense of bringing people together. That part is good. But when it becomes taking a position that nobody else can take, that could have been an educational moment for Governor Hogan and a brave moment, but he missed that opportunity. Maybe in the future for him.
So again, this is about David Lasher running for governor, but
yep.
Just to be fair in terms of what's out there, Governor Hogan did in fact endorse a ban on fracking, and was part of the reason why Maryland now bans fracking. And we'll talk about whether you agree with that or disagree with that. And did things like Justice Reinvent, things that were very atypical for Republicans. The only reason I ask is because some people will leave parties and go into the third parties, and some people try to fight within. And I just was interested in your thoughts on that. I mean, he did seem like he stepped out from his own party in fairly meaningful ways to do things that were independent, or do you disagree with that?
I think that he did enough to be able to say so and give that impression, but I don't think that he did it in substance. I left because I wanted to do something in substance and truly be different, a different kind of candidate and alternative.
All right, well, let's talk about some issues. Let's start with, if you look at polling, not that that's all you should look at, but two of the top issues, if not the top two issues, are public safety
mm-hmm.
and COVID,
mm-hmm.
For obvious reasons. Both of them are, emergencies that are going on as we speak. Let's start with COVID.
Okay.
Governor Hogan gets very high marks for his responsible decisions that he made, certainly from Marylanders and I think nationally as well. Regardless of where we were, let's talk about what comes next. We have a variant that is, making its way around right
Omicron,
now.
Yep.
What is a David and you're going to have to deal with this if you become governor of the state of Maryland. What does a David Lasher administration look like on some of the specifics related to COVID moving forward?
I would want to be data-driven, truly data-driven. I would want to know, and when I say that, I mean not just on one dimension of a problem. Try to bring in multiple factors. What do I mean by that? I do think that Governor Hogan and his team at the Department of Health did a very good job operationally in response to COVID, but I would chide the governor on I think he could have been a better educator, okay, in regard to COVID. When it came out, we were all terrified, me included. For me, what hit me was for some reason I read some articles coming out of Italy, and it struck something in me that said, is the apocalypse upon us? I really had that. It felt scary, and we were all scared in the late winter and spring of 2020. But it was pretty clear by the time we get to summer and fall of 2020, that the virus was not affecting all people the same way. Some portions of our population more vulnerable than others. Well, what would David Lasher do that was different than what David Lasher observed? As soon as that kind of information started becoming available from the professionals, from the data, I would want to start to ask questions of, does this mean that we have to treat everybody the same way, right? I would move towards those who were clearly more vulnerable, right? 85% of the deaths from COVID have been population age 60 or above, right? So if you're elderly, you're vulnerable, and if you have the comorbidities, you are vulnerable. I think the question should have been, what can we do for those people and marshal resources to protect them first? Right? I also think that...
And you don't think that that was done?
I don't think so. We were talking about our daughters before the session started. I too got to, for the first time, spend every day watching my daughter's education and seeing how Anne Arundel school system was responding. And it was, we're going to treat everybody the same. It's a one-size-fit-all solution.
Well, I don't mean to push back a little bit, but I mean, I had a father-in-law that was in a congregate setting. There were vaccines were given out, testing was done, closures were made for the elderly, significantly, in a significant way, probably before the rest of the country. And tell me if you think I'm mistaken on this. There was a lot done for the elderly population. They were able to get vaccines quicker than other populations, and so on. So I guess I'm not understanding. I mean, it seemed like there was a pretty tiered approach to that. You work for the Department of Health as Chief of Staff to Secretary Schrader. What should have been done differently than what they did?
Yeah, and I was long gone by the time COVID. I salute what they have done, especially operationally. But I can give the example.
Governor Hogan was out every day. Him and
Governor Cuomo, who
putting that aside, Governor Hogan was out every single day doing a press conference.
The deaths in New York. Governor Cuomo was not data-driven. He was panic-driven, and what they quickly did, they had excessive. They allowed COVID to take hold within senior living, long-term care, in a way that if they had been less political, I feel, and more data-driven, I feel very strongly, maybe they wouldn't have had the early deaths in New York in the way that they did. So an example, though, because I'm talking about time, I don't have much, if any, criticism about the first handful of months, right? I'm talking about when it became clear that we weren't going to be dropping in the streets. The young people contracted at higher rates but get sick at lower rates, and the mortality rates are very low, right? Especially age 20 and younger. What that means is we don't dismiss it. It means we begin to think about, okay, we want to save lives, protect people from COVID, but what are the other impacts that we're going to have by policy X, policy Y, policy Z? Sure, we've saved lives from COVID. Have you seen the spike in opioid-related overdoses? 100% correlated with the lockdown, stay-at-home policies implemented across the nation, right?
So not to cut you off, moving forward, so in a Lasher administration, moving forward now, let me just ask about a couple specific things.
Yep.
I think I know what the Libertarian Party would say on this, but what do you say about vaccine mandates?
I think there's not the evidence available to impose more mandates. Omicron is spreading. I've seen no deaths due to Omicron yet. I read last evening that Governor DeSantis down in Florida he was literally the poster child for angel of death for the policies that he was following in regard to COVID recently. According to news report last evening, as I went through my news feed, Florida at this moment has the lowest rate of new infections in the 50 states. That's significant. I think that what we have to do is not overreact in crisis situations. I think that's...
Well, why, I mean, do you think that, for example, children should I mean, in schools, how do you make the differentiation between like a measles or, you know, smallpox vaccine for that matter? But let's just go with measles. You know, kids going into the public school have to get a measles vaccine. Why in your mind is this one different, particularly when I guess the data would show that the greater rates of vaccination will kind of stamp this thing out? I mean, that's really, if you believe the data, that's the only way that this thing is going to get stamped out and not become endemic, is when people are all vaccinated.
I like that. That is helpful. So as not to be misunderstood, I'm pro-vax. I really don't know why people don't get themselves vaccinated. But the difference that I would say in this case, it's a matter of how politicized has it become? How much choice are we giving people to make reasonable decisions? And I think the great tragedy, besides the deaths, of course, I think the collateral damage of the way that public health officials have responded to COVID is that there has been a great loss of confidence and faith in public health officials and what they're saying. I think what a Lasher administration would do, I would try to bring together as many different points of view as possible and share them with my fellow Marylanders. Right? I would try to engage in as much persuasion instead of coercion as possible.
You don't think you have enough information right now? I mean, you're not an anti-vaxxer. It seems fairly clear. You know, there's a lot of blame to go around, but one of them might have been a former president saying he wanted to inject himself with bleach, right? I mean, like, it's been crazy from the beginning, but notwithstanding, if you think that vaccines work and you are convinced that they're safe, then what's the difference with the politicization of the politicization, whatever the right, what's the difference how political it is right now, right? And what's the difference about the problems that have been? Wouldn't it make more sense to have everybody vaccinated so we can stamp this thing out now?
If I thought it was an existential threat to our persistence, as it seemed to be early on, I could not live with myself if I didn't take any measure available. But we're not at that moment anymore. And I am not seeing data that justifies mandates of the sorts that we're getting now.
Okay. How about mask mandates for the kids?
I'm against that because I don't see that, because that's the least vulnerable population.
Does it? Yeah, please.
And I like this, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's great.
So I feel that they are the least vulnerable population. And what I most dislike about the masks is that I think that we are putting unnecessary fear into the next generation. My own daughter, I inform her and let her make her decisions. Right? She's vaccinated. I didn't let her make that decision. But I would feel in an emergency situation like that, I would be driven to learn as much as I could on behalf of all my fellow Marylanders to make the best decisions that I felt I was obliged to make, but to give information to others to make so that they could make informed decisions where I felt that that was the right thing to do. And there's no a priori way of drawing where that line is. You have to encounter it and then make your decisions and explain yourself. And
Okay.
I don't think our leaders have done that.
All right, so we have a lot to talk about, so we could talk about this one for our entire hour. I do want to talk about public safety, and we're going to get there next. One of the hallmarks of the Libertarian Party, at least prior to this, historically, has been free speech. Kind of like, and I was always curious as to where does that come from a philosophical standpoint, and then we'll ask some specific questions, but from a philosophical standpoint, what is your position, most importantly, but kind of the party's position on free speech type issues?
Very strong free speech orientation, beliefs, policies, and it relates to COVID. It's actually a good way of bringing the two together. we need to have dissent, right? None of us is infallible, and I've come to believe, certainly not our federal level health officials, and I'm not saying this in the way that some do. We need dissent, we need debate. Bleach was clearly not the right answer, but there are other alternative treatments out there that at least, that do seem to have some impact for at least some people. We should at least be able to talk about that. Because science is real. A lot of folks have that sign in front of their homes. If you believe what's said on that sign, then what you can't believe is that science isn't an answer. It's a mindset, and it's a process. It's a deep humility about what you know, and a burning passion to always question what you think you know. That is me, and so the free speech is so important because we need people to be finding their own ideas about what on any topic, able to express us and give them the chance to persuade us. Where's the line?
Are there some? I don't mean to interrupt. Are there some policies, because it's part of your platform, is kind of the free speech hallmark of the Libertarian Party? Are there some specific policies, specific legislation that you're interested in, specific areas of Maryland law where you think that in some way that there has been some infringing on somebody's free speech?
So here's an example: free speech on campus. So famously, I've referred to it, safe speech versus free speech. Let me be very clear, I'm on the side of free speech. People need to be strong enough to hear things that they might disagree with. They need to be allowed to respond to. But University of Chicago, right, was a leader in stating that we are going to be a campus that honors free speech. We know that our students can only learn and grow and become stronger by encountering that which might make them uncomfortable.
Is that a state legislative thing, or is that just a campus in Illinois?
So University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins, as I understand it, have both adopted free speech codes that are very similar to U Chicago. What I'm interested in, and could become, is the code being honored, lived by, right? And Bobby, I was reading about a Hillel group that wasn't allowed to vote to bring in speakers that they wanted to bring on campus because they came under pressure from the BDS movement. I find it astonishing that anybody would stand up and not say free speech, and that a Hillel group or any group is not allowed to bring in who they want to speak and listen to. And I would go so far as to say that in terms of law, as a principle, as a direction, details I don't know, I would like to see a law that says that if the universities should have free speech and due process codes, and that if they are not living by them and enforcing them, they lose their state funding. They can do what they want, but if they are not truly institutions for free speech, then I don't see why they should get state money for their mission.
Okay. And I guess free speech issues, one of the ones that came to the fore had to do with Grace's law, which was the cyberbullying law. And I know you had talked about that in a different context when you were describing the Libertarian Party. The ACLU was very much against that bill, saying that people had a right to say certain things online, even though they were hurtful to kids. The legislature took a different track and decided that it should be criminal for certain, egregious things that were being targeted at kids online, even though it was speech. Where do you fall on that argument? Because there are probably augmentations of that bill to come. Where do you fall on that?
Well, parents need to be responsible for their kids and what they're seeing online.
From a civil standpoint or from a criminal standpoint? Well, you're just saying this
I'm starting with my principles, how life should be.
Oh, okay.
Right? Okay.
Got it. How about from a legal standpoint?
From a criminal? No, I couldn't. That would be too stifling.
So if a kid goes online and says, or somebody goes online and says against another child, you know, the most egregious thing you can think of, and you should kill yourself, you should kill yourself, you should kill yourself. And they repeat that over and over, and then they send it out to 50,000 people on Instagram or whatever, something that I'm too old to understand. Isn't something like that egregious enough for there to be criminal consequences, or is that just unfettered free speech?
What I worry about, Bobby, is we take an easy example where it, of course that's awful, right?
I know it's awful, but should it be criminally awful?
And the reason that I can't bring myself to say it should be criminally awful is that I don't think the law and the authorities would stop that. What constitutes this awful speech? Where do we draw the line? I don't know how to do it. And in social media, people have been trying to come up with what's fake news, what's hate, what should be suppressed, what shouldn't, and the more we try to define what constitutes acceptable speech, the more that we find that we're being straitjacketed into saying only very limited in what we can say, and it begins to take us very far from where we need to be, which is that people can express their opinions, dissension is allowed, we get to the truth by exchanging ideas just like we are right now. So
let me just ask you and push back a little bit. Maryland law right now says that if you go after a child, if you intend to do harm with the speech that you're doing online, and that it does in fact have the harm, so you show intention and actual harm by your speech. It's not physical harm, but by your speech. That is in fact, depending on the circumstances, can be construed as criminal. That's the current law in Maryland. I guess the question I have for candidate Lasher is, do you disagree with that law? And that is in fact the question.
Okay, so I latched onto a word that was very helpful to me in what you just said, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm just David.
Got it.
Where I think we could have, I can't answer you right now, but let me, the conversation where I would go, the word intentional that you used, very powerful with me, okay? If we can somehow, through dialogue, like we're having right now, right, get to, okay, what are you, the intentional awfulness, that is violence, right? The non-aggression principle, physical force and intentional bullying, right? Intentionally harming somebody, I'm against that, right? But as soon as we start saying we're going to make it criminal, I say, okay, we've got to be very specific about what we're talking about here and make sure that anything that we did put into law was so clearly defined that what it was in law could only be used for the purposes that we clearly intended. And I would go from there.
Okay.
That would be my principle and my approach.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to another topic.
Yep.
Public safety.
Yes.
The violent crime is up.
Yes, it is.
It's not just up in my beautiful city, Baltimore, but it's up everywhere and nationally. Obviously, there are issues about police reform, which came to the fore last year in the General Assembly. The governor has bills that he's introduced. Let me start with just a general question for you. A Lasher administration focuses on what specific bills or what specific legislation to try to curb what is an obvious epidemic of violence going on?
Yeah, so first, I'm going to save the biggest thing that we could do for last. Okay. So, somewhat in order of a few things that you referred to anyway. One thing that a Lasher administration would do is make sure that the very good set of bills that was passed by the Democratic Assembly, right? Governor Hogan, over Governor Hogan, for transparency and accountability amongst the police, law enforcement, was long overdue.
So you liked all that? You liked everything that was in
I have
those?
not yet found anything I didn't like and wouldn't want to be the governor to make sure that we followed through from what was in law to it actually being in place on the streets.
Can I ask you about a couple specific things?
Yeah,
that were in there?
yeah, please.
So there was a provision of that bill had to do with essentially the MPIA, or the Maryland Public Information Act, and when a police officer is accused of misconduct of some sort and goes through the proper investigation, and if that is found out to be unfounded, that the police officer didn't do it, that they didn't do what they were accused of doing, and that the investigatory board found that they were, for lack of a better term, innocent. That's not the correct term legally. Why should, part of the what was passed was, that's public record, and you can go out and find out that, you know, Officer James had A, B, and C accusations, even though unfounded, even though found out not to be true. Doesn't that hurt the police officer? Doesn't that potentially hurt them in terms of their standing? Doesn't that make them less safe? And what is the value of having something like that out in the public sphere when it's essentially an innocent, designation?
You found a great example in the law that I am disappointed to learn was in there, because I can put that into a pattern that I am sensitive to and think as governor would want to prevent. False allegations. I am not against the police. We need the police. I am not defund the police. But the police for too long, in too many egregious ways, did not reform themselves. Probably 19 out of 20 cops are as good as any people, right? The problem in any group, even a group of libertarians, 1 out of 20 persons is just, they're not a good actor. and the other 19 need to not just indulge that individual, right? So what you just mentioned, I do not like that false allegation. The release to the public should be, if I don't know exactly the mechanics, but police can't be hampered from doing their jobs, right? What you just shared would be stifling, I believe. I think it would be soul-crushing to a good cop, right? So that part of the bill I couldn't say that I'm happy to hear is now law, and I would want to work with the Assembly to say, well, we mostly got it right, but maybe we need to make some adjustments.
And how about moving forward on public safety issues?
Well, that's a lot. So
let me give you a couple examples, and just you take it from there. The governor has proposed in the special session right now, but the bill is not going to be voted on, but a bill about judicial transparency, and what that entails is essentially for certain for certain crimes, violent crimes, that there be more, it's more detailed than this, but more sunlight, as it were, on the decisions that are being made courtroom by courtroom. That's one proposal. The other one has to do with the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, which we really don't need to get into, but the third one has to do with enhanced sentences, greater time behind bars for individuals who have been convicted at least twice. So repeat violent offenders of individuals with the use of a handgun in the commission of a crime. Any disagreement with any of that?
Yeah, well, sure. So let's, what was number one?
Judicial transparency. So
we're friends, right? At the outset of this conversation, I would submit that you were being more defensive of Governor Hogan than I was at the outset. Okay. Right now, I like that judicial transparency bill. Transparency is always good. We need more, as much as we can get from our authorities, we should seize. I had the personal experience of seeing in courts judges making clinical decisions from the bench as to the mental state, condition of individuals. I witnessed it. Judges presuming to be clinicians, which we need transparency. Transparency is good. It leads to accountability. So that bill of Hogan's I would enthusiastically endorse. Number two was?
Enhanced sentencing for repeat violent criminals.
Useless.
Why so?
Symptoms, not causes. That's a better way of saying it. What I noticed from recent statements from the governor is I felt like I was in a time machine going back to the late 80s or 90s. It's the same messages of we've got to get tough on crime, and crime is surging, right? There's been deniers of that, but it is surging, and so when I said useless, what I meant by that is non-impactful. Okay, what would be impactful? We need to realize an old truth, which is that prohibition doesn't work, and that the prohibitions on drugs are what have made Baltimore as deadly and hopeless as it is. And what I submit is that until we end the war on drugs and in a humane way allow people to get access to the yes alkaloids, yes opioids that they're somehow tragically they came to be addicted to, that their bodies crave. We've got to get them access. We've got to make it rational for young men, and we're talking mostly men here, young men in West Baltimore to live a life that's geared at the future, make some sacrifices today for a better future tomorrow. It is irrational for those engaged in the drug trade in West Baltimore today to choose a different way of life. So far as I can tell, the whole incentive system is wrong. That's why we have the violence. So there is nothing. If you care about the 300, where are we, 320 murders in Baltimore?
It's over 300.
Yeah, I know it's over 300. If you really truly care about that, then you really truly need to start engaging in a serious conversation about how we bring an end to the war on drugs so that it's not gangsters and traffickers who are running those neighborhoods. I can't think of anything more incumbent upon us, an imperative for Renaissance in Baltimore than that line of policy.
Okay, I'm going to get there on question B, but question A is repeat violent offenders with the use of a handgun. So somebody who is commission of a felony using an illegal gun, and you jump to legalization of all drugs, which I'm interested in talking to you about. What about the individual who is using a gun, getting convicted twice in the commission of violent crimes that are not possession of drugs?
All we libertarians are unreservedly against those who use guns and force to try to in engaging in crime.
So and I'm positing the hypothetical, if it's true that they're getting lighter sentences than perhaps they should be getting, as a libertarian, does it offend you as a libertarian to say, maybe these folks should be getting some more time in jail?
I think that there's a more fun. I do not think that the disproportionate number of black Americans and black males especially who are in jail are so much there because of these. They're there because of the drug trade and the incentives it creates and the lives that it drew those folks into. Now, if you're using a gun in the commission of a crime, you're a violent offender. You are a criminal. You belong in jail. Will increasing those penalties make any difference to the conditions in West Baltimore in our lifetimes? No.
So, all right. So let's move on to the legalization. So, the libertarian and your personal policy would be for legislation to legalize, not decriminalize, but actually make legal all drugs.
That's correct. Now, you're not going to leap there in one giant leap. There's any number of reasons, different levels of government. Can you explain the proposal? I can give you the vision, the end state. The end state is that we legalize even alkaloids and opioids.
So heroin, crack, all these
alkaloids
things
are cocaine. Opioids are.
Would they be legally sold on the street?
They would be legally made available in almost the same way that we now make medical cannabis legal. It would not be. So please, it is not a vision of you go to the Wawa and get your heroin. I mean, that's absurd. That it's what it is a model like medical cannabis, where you have a distribution model of response. Medical cannabis, it's working in Maryland. But because the alkaloids and the opioids are so addictive, you don't just sell the cannabis and medical reasons or otherwise and let people do what they want with them. This is an opportunity. If you have a place where people need to come to get the heroin or the heroin synthetic in replacement that's their devil, then you've got a moment to interdict or intervene, intervention in behavioral health terms, and try to get this person the services that they need.
So are you referring to like Delegate Morheim's safe injection use site program? Is that what you're talking about? So places where they can...
I do not know that particular program.
I think it's... So essentially you would have places that you could go, they do them in some cities in Canada, where you would go and be able to have safe use of drugs but have mental health and so forth.
And they do it in other places too, and it's famously depicted in The Wire.
Right.
But that's fine. What I'm talking about, for a picture, think of the medical cannabis distribution dispensaries is what we call them, right? 2 per county? No, it's a little bit, it doesn't matter how many there are. Right now, that's where you go with a doctor's script.
2 per legislative district.
There you go, thank you. You go with your script, and in a controlled and safe manner, you get what you medically need. Should it be expanded to recreation? That's not even a question for me. Yes, of course. Not just for, but that doesn't help any. Legalizing recreational cannabis generates tax revenues that the state can spend, which one of the candidates who was interviewed here seemed to be interested in. But it doesn't do anything for the kids in West Baltimore. And it doesn't do anything for addicts of opioids. So safe zones, sure, but what I want is places where people can go to get what their bodies need, the chemicals that they need, safer versions of the chemicals. They have a moment when they can begin to receive services. When appropriate, you can bring in loved ones, family, important part of recovery for most addicts, okay? And you can do something else, fentanyl, carfentanil. It would immediately go away as being on the streets. Nobody who's addicted wants fentanyl or carfentanil. It's the traffickers who are using it to cut the drugs, make them move further, and boost their profits that are putting the poison, putting that into drugs. So yeah, we're humans, we're flawed. There's always going to be addiction. And I think we need to, instead of trying to deny human nature and continue with prohibition, we need to accept human nature and figure out the way to bring hope back to make it possible for a renaissance in Baltimore and make it easier to get people who are addicts the services that they need.
Okay, so just want to be clear, legalization of drugs, correct?
Legalization, not mere decriminalization.
So then if it's a model based on medical cannabis, you still can't sell medical cannabis. So
yeah.
If it's a legal drug though, if just legal, you can possess it, you can sell it, or do you have a model? Does the libertarian model on this say that you have, licenses and distribution networks and so forth?
I can't pull the blueprint out of my pocket, right? What I'm trying to do here, Bobby, is encourage for everybody, you, others, to go through the journey that I myself went through in probably the last 3 or 4 years, which is to go through all the options available to us if you really care about downtown Baltimore, if you really care, what can we do, what will and won't work? And I've arrived where I am trying to be explicit, legalization of everything for the reasons expressed, because I think that anything else is not doing right, but it will not work, is merely political. It is not genuinely helpful. And I think that people here, 2 years ago, I don't think I was here with my position, but I've come to realize that I feel it is the only way forward that will work and be humane and restore hope.
Anything else on public safety that Lasher admitted besides the legalization of drugs? Anything else on public safety?
I think the tragedy that we have in public safety is the loss of trust and faith between the community and the police.
You for the school resource officer program?
I am.
All right.
I am for schools that wish for the resource officers to be able to carry guns. I'm for that too.
What is the Libertarian Party or your particular, and we only have about 15 minutes left and a lot of issues to cover very quickly, on Second Amendment issues?
Yeah, it's a fundamental constitutional right that needs to be honored, but I think it also needs to maintain. We have very restrictive gun laws here in Maryland already. If what you really care about is gun violence, it's almost, we get back to West Baltimore again. If you really care about gun violence, two-thirds of it is suicides, right? People who die at the end of a gun. 1/3 of it is street violence, mostly, not entirely, of course, drug-driven. I think the conversation we need to have is not about gun control. The gun control laws, we already have the tightest. They're doing nothing for Baltimore. So if you want to see something different, this is one of the reasons, thinking about this issue, moved very deeply by some incidents that I've been around. That war on drugs is the way to have the largest impact on deaths by guns in the state of Maryland that could be entertained, let alone implemented.
Let me just ask you, right to carry, for it or against it?
For it.
So anybody who doesn't have certain...
license, I mean, people, you need...
So everybody, that's the way the law works right now. If you don't, would you open that up to anybody for that wants it, that doesn't have certain convictions and so forth?
So it's not, very little in life is all one thing or all the other, right? Anybody? No, any libertarian you talk to, any gun rights advocate, they're in the Democratic Party too, and Republican. It's responsible gun ownership, right? So the certification program, as I understand it, for being able to carry a handgun in Maryland, it's a good program. What I would say, though, is that the conditions under which law enforcement can grant you the carry permit are far too restrictive. We can't have it that just bad actors, bad people who don't care about the law have guns, and government agents have guns, and nobody else can defend themselves.
So let me just ask you just specific yes or no question. Mike Huff has the bill every year, Senator Huff always has the bill every year on expanding the right to carry to those who have for self-defense reasons. If they claim self-defense and they don't have criminal convictions or mental health issues, however you define that, then you would, as of right, be allowed the right to carry. Agree or disagree?
So, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a lifetime politician, so I don't know the bill, but what you just described in its essence, I would support that.
Okay. I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round because we are starting to run out of time.
Go ahead.
The governor put in place, on behalf of Senator Kramer and others, an executive order back in 2016, 2017, dealing with the BDS movement that you talked about before, so that companies that are engaged in that cannot do business with the state of Maryland.
Companies engaged in BDS activities.
That's correct. Cannot do business with the state of Maryland, cannot be involved in our pension system, and so on. Agree or disagree? Will you keep that in place?
Is it mandate, or is it is it mandate, coercive directive, or is it disclosure? Because I am not BDS. I've already made clear, right? I'm trying to understand
what the provision. If a company is involved, they have to, by affidavit, state that they are not engaged in that. And if they are found to be involved in any way the BDS movement against Israel, they cannot participate in our state contracts and pensions and so forth. That's the executive order. Agree or disagree?
State pensions or all procurements in the state?
Both.
State pension seems more narrow. So I could not get comfortable with mandates for all state procurement for that specific cause or any other. It's not, I think I've made clear where I am on BDS. But what I'm also trying to make clear is there need to be restraints on executive power, and we don't have, and I would be very reserved in what I would do with my powers as governor. And so, no, if it's a mandate, I would have to be more respectful of people's freedom to associate, engage in politics, but to an alternative approach of disclosing if you are involved in those kinds of activities, I would be all for that, because as I hope has also become clear, I am all for transparency and sunshine.
So another issue, judicial elections. It's a bill that is of obvious importance to the bar, and a bill that keeps coming up. In our district court, they are appointed. In our Court of Special Appeals and Court of Appeals, they are appointments. In our circuit court, there's a strange system of appointments followed by elections.
Yeah.
Do you think that judges should be elected in the state of Maryland?
I'm not feeling that way. I'm feeling that for the judiciary, there needs to be visibility and transparency, as I've made clear. But I think the appointment process is, we don't want, the judiciary is already politicized enough, and that's just, it would just make the politicization of the judiciary excessive. And when I say enough, there's an inevitable amount of politicization of everything, so I would not be for that, no, election of the judges.
So you would do away with the election of circuit court judges?
The way I just heard it described. Yeah.
Okay. Fracking. State of Maryland banned fracking. I'm kind of jumping around issues here. Banned fracking several years ago. For or against the ban of fracking in Maryland?
I think I'm okay with the ban on fracking. This is a place where my instincts towards letting businesses and organizations do what they, follow their missions, comes in conflict with. I think on the fracking, the community seems to support it. I would keep it in place.
Okay. Redistricting.
Oh, okay.
It's obviously a very large topic, and it's going on as we speak down in Annapolis. So. Yes. Your thoughts about congressional redistricting, legislative redistricting, and understanding that we only have a few minutes left, and the kind of the independent commission doing redistricting versus the legislative body doing its own redistricting, national, state, and so forth.
Yeah, so you're talking to somebody who stood for Congress against John Sarbanes in the Maryland 3rd Congressional, which is, folks may or may not know, depending on who you talk to, the first, second, or third most gerrymandered district of the 435 in the U.S. Congress. So I'm very familiar with the issue. I'm also very familiar with hypocrisy on the issue. Right? Don't take it from me, take it from former Governor O'Malley, that Representative Sarbanes he and his team were involved firsthand in the drawing of those maps so that he could stay in office and have the convenience of driving down to Annapolis, because he likes Annapolis even though he lives on the other side of Baltimore. What's my point here? My point here is that I had hoped in this round, with all the attention that had been brought to gerrymandering over the last 10 years or so by League of Women Voters and others, that we would arrive at a place where elected officials, at least on one issue, would set aside the pure partisanship and try to move towards, yes, competitive elections in our democracy. Might break a little less towards us than we might like, but we say democracy, we say inclusion. Here's districts that prove that we want competitive districts and real boisterous and a cacophony of voices and different representation. And the plan out of the legislature that looks like it's going to become the plan is a partisan plan that received an F from the analyst at Princeton. Independent, experts in gerrymandering gave the legislator's plan an F out of Princeton and out of Stanford.
The congressional maps you're talking about.
For the congressional maps, right? And the two-party and independent member, the independent maps, received an A. Perfect? No. But when we see the assembly giving very weak excuses for their votes for this new map that is drawn for one party interest and one party's interests only, it's very discouraging. And I'd like to see more people more voices in journalism and more independent voices saying, no, this legislative map from the assembly was the wrong one to choose, and we don't hear anybody saying it.
So let me push back just in terms of geopolitical, just looking at the politics in general. Washington is broken. I don't think I'm saying anything controversial by saying that, and it becomes a numbers game down there.
Yep.
So if Texas and North Carolina and other states that are controlled by a Republican governor, Republican legislature, are gangbusters going to try to get as many numbers as they can, so that the D's vote this way and the R's vote this way, and they have more on one side than the other, then why is it an issue for Maryland to kind of, because it happens to be a different party, to unilaterally disarm? Doesn't it make more sense for this to be a national rather than a state fix?
No, you just gave a rationalization for not doing right by Maryland. What we should do, we should say, let's show the rest of the nation the way democracy ought to work. Let's be an example to others. If we are going to say something on this issue, that we stand for democracy, we're the ones who are going to save democracy. And then the first time that you get to vote on whether you're really for democracy or you're really for partisan politics, and you vote for partisan politics, why should we believe anything else you say?
Okay. We have 2 minutes left, and I do want to give you a chance. I know this has gone quickly. I want to give you a chance to just kind of, I'm going to give you a couple quick yes-nos, and if you don't have enough information, then say so.
I will.
Constitutional amendment for a clean environment, which they're talking about this year in the General Assembly, yes or no?
No, what does that even mean? How could you enforce it? Constitutional amendment, there's not debate. We need our elected officials standing up for accountability, working with each other, explaining themselves. Constitutional amendment, worst possible way to pursue that goal that I share.
Okay. It would give you a legal remedy, a constitutional legal remedy in court. So if there was pollution, people would have an opportunity to sue under their constitutional rights. Still doesn't move you?
No, we would have to get very, very specific. We can talk about, I will hopefully have opportunity to talk about environment later, but no, that mechanism for this purpose, no.
Okay. Public financing of campaigns.
This is another one where I'm of two parts, but no.
Okay. I have so many more to go through and exactly 60 seconds left, so I'm going to stop here.
Yes.
I'm going to give David Lasher the last word as the Libertarian candidate in this race for Chief Executive Officer of our great state of Maryland, the governorship. Give him one more time. Why is it that people should cross their party lines and go to vote for the Libertarian candidate, David Lasher? And how is it, if you can, within that same 60-second time frame, how is it that you become the first Libertarian to do so?
The why is that if what you're looking for, if you're one of the many people in Maryland who's looking for both compassionate and responsible, who is looking for principled and accomplished, then who is bringing, now that one of the Democratic candidates has dropped out, is the only candidate who is bringing public sector achievement and private sector experience and achievement to the role. You only have one choice. I think the way I would, and that would be me, what I would like to close with is an invitation. That's what I would like to do. I'd like to people don't know the Libertarian Party. The invitation is to follow us, learn a little bit more. You probably heard some things that you liked, some things that you didn't like. You heard a mix. But you heard honesty. I hope you heard thoughtfulness. I hope you felt empathy. That's certainly me, and it's the libertarians that I know. And this is a different way, different type of, this is what you could get with me as governor, and I would work with the assembly. I would engage. I would argue civilly. We would disagree civilly where needed in order to actually get things done. So I would want to be an example, get things done, listen to all, work with all as governor of Maryland.
Okay. So there you have it, our final interview of the day. Libertarian candidate for governor, David Lasher. Thank you so much for joining the Maryland State Bar Association here at beautiful Stevenson University in Baltimore County for an hour of talking some interesting issues with you. So thank you so much, and good luck to you, and we look forward to seeing you more.
Thank you.
Take care.
I appreciate it.
All right.